Welcome to Leaders in Lending. I'm your host, Jeff Keltner. This week's episode features my conversation with Cheryl Purrington, the Chief Lending Officer at ACFCU, a credit union in Amarillo, Texas. I really enjoyed this conversation with Cheryl. We got into some of the discussions of digital transformation and dove a little bit into their deployment of ITMs, which I wasn't even aware were a thing. So I learned a lot what they are, what it takes to support them, how it can change your level of service and the customer experience. And we really dove into leadership, teams, people, how you find the right people, motivate and manage teams to deliver high qualities of service. There were, I thought, a lot of great experiences and bits of wisdom Cheryl gave. I really learned a lot from the discussion. I'm sure you will as well. Please enjoy this conversation with Cheryl. Cheryl, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for making the time to join us today.
I appreciate you for having me, Jeff. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I always start with this question for my guests now, which is kind of like, most of my guests do not describe themselves as intentional bankers. They kind of did not grow up dreaming of being a credit union banking executive when they were a kid. Tell me a little bit about your career path. What brought you here?
Wow, that's kind of an interesting question. No, I did not dream about being a credit union professional.
I mean, most of us don't, right? When we were kids, and yet here we are.
Yeah. I started out as a teller. I just needed a part-time job. I was kind of in an interesting situation. I was kind of working in some missionary work in a church that I was at the time. So I was doing some kind of full-time missionary work and I needed a part-time job. So, hey, something came across as a part-time teller. So I applied as a part-time teller and it kind of just went up from there. And I've had almost every kind of position that I could have in a credit union since then, and except accounting. I've never been interested in accounting.
Never got. I love that. You spent the whole career at the credit union, but never did accounting.
Yeah,
that's kind of,
my CFO is not going to like that too much, but
Yeah, we have accountants and we have non-accountants. It's kind of funny. It's like I spent my entire 6 years at Google. I never touched search or advertising. And people go, "What else does Google do? How do you get a career at Google? How do you search or advertising?"
Like, yeah.
So kind of funny but true. But it's interesting that you started that level, because I know one of the central themes for how you think about the business and what you need to deliver is quality of service, and you kind of started on the front lines of delivering service. So would love to just start with the question: how do you think about defining what good service is and measuring whether or not you're delivering? Because I feel like we all feel that reality that, like, if we're delivering good service, that produces good results. But how do you think about really understanding what that means and how you can tell if you're living up to that promise or not?
Well, service is where it's at. I don't think service is ever going to go away. If we don't have good service somewhere, we're not going to go. When thinking about coming on this podcast, I was thinking about service and kind of how I'm passionate about service in itself. And, I was doing a little bit of research about, how we retain our current membership, or if we work really hard on getting new membership. And it talked about how, 57% of people will spend more on stuff that they're loyal to. And I was thinking a lot of that in regards to my own experience with just service in general. Like I have a pharmacist that I go, and every time I go to get my prescription, I get cruddy service. Just horrible service. They could care less really if I come in there going, or that's the impression I get, right? Perception is the reality.
Yeah, perception is reality.
Exactly. Right? And so why do I keep going back? There's plenty of pharmacies around here. I don't know. I've just always been loyal to that one. So, I keep thinking about that. It's going to take a lot for me for somewhere to get me to come over to them, just because I feel for some reason that I'm loyal. So I think about that in regards to my credit union. And if we are not spending enough time and energy on our current members, sooner or later, someone's going to get them, and there's plenty of institutions around here and just around the block that somebody could go to and get service. So I think, how do you gauge that? That's a good question. I don't know if I have the 100% answer to that, Jeff.
Well, yeah, I love your pharmacy example. I actually had maybe you'll find something in this, but last night my oldest son was sick yesterday, and I went out to pick up medications from the pharmacy. My wife's like, "We're going to try this CVS that has a drive-through." And in 3 minutes, I pulled up. They put the meds in a bin. I gave him my credit card, and I was on my way out. And I went, I call my way, why have we ever gone anywhere else? And please don't ever send me to another pharmacy ever again. Because like I text her as I'm on my way home with medication. She goes, already?
She's like, what?
How is that possible? I went, yeah.
Yeah.
But now I'm kind of going, I will be there again. It's not the closest, but man, was that a convenient quality of service that I think probably will earn my loyalty.
Yep.
And that's I think the kind of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, they got you. And as soon as they got you, now you're like, why did I never go there before? Now I'm always going there, right? Yeah.
That's right. There, I'll be a loyal customer of the CVS on Royal Parkway.
That's right. There's some good sponsorship right there.
How do you think about, and we'll talk about this later, but we'll talk about people later because I really want to get into that. I think it's a key part of how we deliver service. But how do you think about service in the context of the transformation of digital? I know you guys are doing some digital transformations. It's kind of like how we deliver service used to be relationships, a person you knew. And I feel like that's still important, but there's also this element of like, can I do it in my pajamas on my couch when I don't want to come in? I don't want to talk to somebody. I just want to transfer money from my savings to my checking to pay a big bill or something like this. How do you think about the kind of combination or the balance between that human high touch level of service that I kind of feel viscerally and that ease in digital and the investments you have to make that a reality?
Well, I mean, since COVID, I think everybody's mindset has changed, right? I mean, and we're not going back. I think we all know that, or I think we've settled into that fact that we're not going back to the way things were before. We pretty much have transitioned into a new era of the way we're going to provide things. And, some places were more prepared for that than others. And I feel like this is really where we are now, is that we don't want to be unprepared again. And even though we know that a lot of our members we're never going to be able to help to make everybody happy, right? We never can. Nobody ever can make everybody happy. So you're still going to have people that don't like that. They want that face-to-face. And so we will still provide a little face-to-face, but you're right. We are going into a more digital transformation. We're going to have ITMs, interactive teller machines, where they still will be able to have face-to-face with their favorite tellers. So those ones that they did get to know and they have relationships with them. So
describe an ITM to me, because you were using this phrase and I was starting to Google going, what is an ITM? What an ATM is? What's an ITM?
An ITM is just an interactive teller machine. So basically you look at an ATM, it's just digital. It's just going to tell you a screen. You're going to get by. An ITM is you're going to be actually having a conversation with that person. So I don't know if you've ever been anywhere it says if you want to speak to a person on an ATM and it gives up a digital image. And I don't know if you've ever had that before, but
I've never seen,
it's
I
awesome.
don't use ATMs a lot.
Yeah, it's really awesome because they could still do things the way they want to as an ATM if they want to, but if they actually want to have an actual conversation with their tellers, they can still do that. And so those tellers have to have special skills. They have to be able to have a conversation with that person the whole entire time. We have certain branches already that our tellers are already behind screens. They're in a back room. And so they're already kind of doing that. But with the ITM, you have to be on the screen the whole entire time. You don't turn off the camera. You're having that conversation the whole entire time and you're helping them through the transaction. And yeah.
And does that, when you're using an ITM, it seems like then the teller that I'm speaking to does not need to be, I can use tellers in one location to serve multiple ITM locations, which is it's kind of like a call center, but not an in-person sort of virtually.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. And that's exactly what we're going to use it for. We actually are remodeling our whole entire headquarters. We have a third level that we have totally rebuilt. And on one side of it, we have a whole bunch what we call pods. There's 28 of them and it's all glass. And our ITM tellers are going to be in there and they're going to be servicing all of our different branches. So of course it helps with staffing. Somebody's out at another branch somewhere. This ITM teller over here at our main headquarters can fill in with, and take care of them. So it helps with a lot of things like that. Yeah.
Do you change how you, it's a really interesting model and it seems like the best efficiency parts of like the call center with the more human parts of interactions. I'm wondering two things really. A, is there any ability to access that same capability like from not an ITM, but from my phone or my computer when I'm at home? Because I don't have to be in your physical location in some sense to access that teller. I'm curious if that's something you've thought about. And secondly, do you change the physical layout of branches or where you put ATMs at all? Because most, we've all got that. So we kind of like, hiding the pin pad when you put it in because the next person's like 4 feet from you.
Yeah.
And that's uncomfortable enough with the screen transaction. When I'm starting to have a conversation, I feel like that's even less comfortable. And I'm curious if you're changing the physical layout of where the ITMs are to support a more holistic conversation with the teller and the individual.
Yeah, you're right on with that. I mean, you have to be secure. Your members have to feel secure in their transactions. So when they walk in our lobby, it's going to be completely different. We're actually going to have ITM rooms where the ITMs will be in, not real rooms, but I mean, they're glassed off. So they can go in, they can actually close the door if they want to. They're all glass. And so they're free to have a very open and honest conversation. Our drive-throughs are pretty spaced out. So it would just be like a typical drive-through situation where people are talking over, I think it'll even be a little bit more secure than what our current ones are. So I think that we're going to, of course, this is all trial and error. So we haven't even launched it yet. We're probably about 2 months out about to totally launch it. So.
And let me ask, that trial and error point to me is really interesting because I feel like I'm hearing more and more from the financial services executives I talk to, the same kind of feedback I hear from Silicon Valley folks, which is like, we're not quite sure how it'll work. We're going to launch and then we're going to test and we're going to learn and change. And I'm curious how you think about, that's, I think, very different than the cultural history of most financial institutions that are kind of like, we got the process changes once every couple of years. It's a little more stable of an environment where we're talking about, hey, we're going to go out and try something that might not work and we're going to learn and change it. And how do you get people on board with that different way of thinking? That's like a very different operating rhythm and like an expectation of how awesome you've prepped a launch. You're going to go, hey, we're going to launch it. We're not sure it's right yet. Whereas I think before we had to be totally sure it was right before we put it out the door. So I'm curious how you manage the cultural element of getting your teams on board with that and comfortable taking the risks involved and putting something out there where you are not as sure that you have all the answers when you're putting it out the door.
Yeah. I think number one is having your whole executive team on board. We have a very strong, cohesive executive team, and we all work very, very closely together. We're all we all have the same vision in mind. We all we started this probably, I would say about almost 2 years ago, really getting the vision in mind of what we wanted. We actually went to a few different credit unions in different areas, one down in Houston, one about a couple hours away in Lubbock, Texas, and they have the same model. And so thankfully, with credit unions, and, I'm sure with some banks too, they're very open and honest. And a lot of times they'll share things with you and kind of just get in there and say, hey, what worked for you guys? What didn't work for you guys? And so we did a lot of tweaks already in the way that we saw the model that they were doing and how we've changed it and already made some changes. And I'm sure we'll have to make changes to ours. And we're going to be very open and honest to anybody that wants to come and we'll share with them also. So.
I love it. It's a fascinating time to see these kinds of changes. I kind of wanted to continue on with the theme of people for a minute because you made a comment to me in an earlier conversation that in some ways it's all about who you hire, and that left to me many questions because I think it's an insightful point, but also a challenging thing to implement. So let me start maybe I'll just go through the funnel. But how do you think about finding the right people? I mean, the books are full of here's how to interview, and the company histories are full of like, hey, we didn't manage to hire the right people. And I'm curious how you think about what you're looking for in an interview process to find that right fit for the team there.
I always say that hiring is like a crap shot because it kind of is. I mean, you never know what you're going to get because you could get people who are totally prepared for an interview and they come in the first day of work and they're like, who are you? You are not the person I interviewed. But I think it all goes back to just really being prepared on what we want, completely knowing what our vision is and what kind of employees we want. We want those people that have the all-in attitude. We have a very our CEO Scott Rose has a very, very servant-like leadership role, and he's very, very active with all of our employees, and he teaches on a regular basis to all of our employees. He does classes, so we're very into educating all of our employees. We want them to be passionate. We want them to see the same vision. And so we have started way out in advance and just kept telling them. And I think not keeping secrets about what our goals are was a big thing that we wanted to do. We weren't always like that at the credit union. It used to be, certain members of executive team knew certain things and everybody else just kind of waited around to see what they were told to do. But that's not the way it is anymore. We want our staff to know everything. We want them to know every step of the way. We want them to get their input. We want them to see that it's actually being listened to. It's not just by word only. We want them to see that they have a say in it. And so we're putting people on teams. So people that would not necessarily be thinking that they're the ones making the decisions, they're the ones that we're putting on the teams making the decisions. And so it really helps them play a part in it, and it helps them have buy-in attitude towards it all.
I love it. I love the transparency is fantastic. And your point about hiring for attitude is really interesting, because I feel like so often people fall into what I think of as a mistake of hiring for experience. And at certain levels, you want that, but kind of attitude beats experience in my experience.
Yeah,
it's the wrong way to describe it. I am curious are there questions or things you find helpful in trying to find that right attitude? Because it's a very different thing than it's easy in an interview to go, oh, let me look at the resume. Have you done the thing I'm asking you to do before for 3 to 5 years? And then that seems like a pretty good bar. And hiring for attitude is a different kind of process how you find that. So do you have any tips on how to find attitude in the employees as you're looking at them?
I mean, if I had the golden ticket to that, I'd probably be not working right now. But other than that, I think we look at, it's funny because these ITMs, we have to hire for special skills for that. I mean, you really, to be able to have that interactive conversation and for that person to think that you're really interested in talking to them, you have to have that skill. And so what we did is for even our in-house tellers, they had to apply to be an interactive teller. Even though we're going to all transition to that at some point, we hired, we interviewed out for that, and they had to interview through this kind of medium. Yes, they had to interview through a Zoom meeting. They had to get on there. We gave them some different stuff that would kind of distract them during the interview. And so just kind of through.
You're like somebody's instant messaging them in the middle of the interview to see how they handle it.
We gave them some crossword puzzles that they had to do. We gave them a couple of different things. Really? Yeah, just some we have a very interesting training team. They come up with some really, really good ideas, but they really had to be able to bring that excitement. And I mean, these people are going to be the ambassadors for this program, right? We're not going to be, we're just making some of the decisions. They're going to be the ones that are presenting it to our members, and they have to get them excited. And so, yeah. So I think just really seeing that, I mean, we can teach people our processes, right? I mean, we can teach them how to do our programs and what we teach at ACFCU and different things, but I can't teach you to be a very, they say that sometimes people have that charisma or they have that thing, that draws people into them.
X factor.
Yeah.
They call
it. A je ne sais quoi, or however you say that. Je ne sais quoi. How do you say that?
Je ne sais quoi.
There you go. But I think personable is something that you can learn, but I think you see that. And that's something that, we've really just kind of been trying to get as much people in on different people doing the interviews, looking at it, thinking that they're giving their ideas. I mean, that's really all it is. I mean,
that's fascinating. I'm glad I didn't have to interview there, because I struggle with the crossword without trying to do an interview at the same time.
I'm glad I didn't have these, believe me. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds hard. Let me ask you a slightly different take on it, which is, you talked about what you really get being a crapshoot. And that is also a large part of my experience. It's you do your best to screen, and then ultimately not everybody is what you thought they would be. And there's kind of two schools of thought on this, I find. One is when you've got an employee that's not working out the way you thought, that you train and move around and find a role. And the other is if you accept that that's true, you need to get good at hiring, and you need to get good at, letting people go that aren't working out the way you thought, because you can end up just holding on to people. I'm curious your thought on how you manage that employee that comes in and isn't exactly what you thought, and how you deal with that. Because, particularly in Silicon Valley, I hear all sorts of different, hire fast, fire fast is one of the phrases I've heard. I'm not sure I love that one, but how do you think about dealing with that reality that as well as you can do doing the interviews, at some point you're going to say, hey, this is not what we thought. And we need to do something to maintain the level of service we want for our customers. We got to make a change here. How do you think about managing that part of the process, that part of the experience of hiring a great team?
Oh, it's crucial. It's funny you would say that because I mean we have really worked that into the way we do things around here the last few years too. I mean, getting out of the whole thing of doing things because we used to do them that way, or keeping people on staff because they've always worked here, and trying to figure out places. But we're all about finding that right seat on the bus. If there is not a seat that that person fits in, and we've thought about it, we've talked about it, we've had such discussions with them, yeah, it's time. I mean, my CEO said that, he'll help you find a new address. I mean, because, you know, you've got to like what you do. Okay. And it goes both ways. On my LinkedIn profile, I have the thing that's on my vision on my LinkedIn profile is do what you love. And I totally believe that, because if you're not doing what you love, it is going to come through in everything you do. And so if that person is not being able to be on that right seat of the bus, having that right vision, mind thinking, if they're not moving forward, we always say, if you guys aren't on this bus or you're not on, you're going to be left behind. And that's just the way it's going to be. And so we've had to make some really hard decisions over the last few years. We've had to kind of let people go that we just knew that they weren't going on the same track as us. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating because I also read the comparison. A lot of people compare their companies to family, want to feel like a family. They say it's a terrible analogy because like you can't, your crazy aunt is your crazy aunt or your crazy uncle, and like you don't get to fire them because they're not a fit. And the analogy I've heard, and I'm curious your take on this, is more like a high performing sports team. Like if there's a better person to play starting pitcher for the Dodgers, I'm an LA guy, so like if there's a better pitcher, then it's the general manager's duty to go find that person, to put him in the spot and make the team the best they can. You don't have a specific duty to the individuals. You have a duty to the organization, the team. And I think setting that expectation is really important, because when you tell people it's like a family, then they feel hurt when you're like, hey, you don't really fit in here. Like, yeah, I can't tell my kids that. Not that I would, but that would be hurtful. So I feel like setting that expectation and finding the right verbiage for how we even talk about the roles we play and what kind of organization we want to be is really critical to setting the expectations that like, yeah, you kind of got to earn your spot. And every year you kind of got to keep earning it, right? If you're not.
That's very true. And in fact, I mean, I've had to have discussions with certain employees that I really want them to be on that. I want them to be on the same wavelength with that too. I want them to be able to see it. I mean, sometimes it doesn't always go that way. We have to kind of help them see it. But I want them to eventually, if I'm going to be a good leader, I think I can kind of coach them into realizing that they're really not in the right seat. And eventually they've come back to me and said, thanks for showing me that, because I really wasn't in the right place. And even people who have actually left the credit union, if they get somewhere where they're in a better place, I'm happy for them,
Yeah, that's a great point, that like, as much as it's uncomfortable as a leader to have people who are underperforming, it's equally uncomfortable to be an underperformer, because like, it. I mean, it's not like you don't know. You're sitting around the team going, I know I'm not the strongest player here, and that doesn't feel great either. And sometimes a better fit can change that dynamic for the individual and for the better for them, even if that's not necessarily how that conversation is perceived on day one. But it's
100%.
it is ultimately better for everybody.
Yeah. I agree.
All right. See, I told you we had good content here. Is there anything you wanted to talk about today that we didn't get to? Because I got 3 questions that I close with. Before I do that, I always like to ask whether there are topics or things we missed, kind of my performance review as a host. Anything you think we ought to have covered that we didn't?
No, I mean.
All right, I get good performance reviews at the end of interviews.
Well, unless you want to tell me really quick what those 3 questions are, so I can start thinking about them. No, it's all right.
Well, the 3 they're not too bad.
Okay.
The first one is, what's the best piece of career advice you've ever gotten?
Cool. What's the best piece of career advice I've ever had? I think listen to my gut. And I know listen to my gut, because a lot of times I have found that my gut is right and I don't listen to it. And a year down the road, I wish I would have. And I know that that's very cliche, but it really is that I have found that a lot of times my instincts are right. And so as old as I am, I think I should just keep going with that.
Listen to I like that. It is true that sometimes we get so caught up in thinking about, you kind of like, this happened to me at work really recently, where I was like, this is clearly the answer to the question. And people started debating with me, start like making this overly complicated thing. And I come back to me like, isn't this the answer? And I went, that was my initial reaction. I don't know why I gave up on it.
Yep.
Well, obviously, like
Yep.
it's like the thing. And sometimes you get caught up in the little edges and the what about this and what about that.
We make it too hard on ourselves. We always seem to make it too hard.
Trust the gut.
Yeah.
Trust the gut. All right. The first one was good. Second question is, what's the best piece of advice you've gotten or give people about the general consumer banking, consumer lending space?
That I would give to like our membership or our employees, or what do you mean by that?
Your team. So let's just say to your team members.
To our team members, about the whole, or
just in general.
Something.
You can take it any way you want.
Anything I want about something I would just have to say, be honest with yourself and know what you want and go for it.
That seems like a second set of good career advice. Be honest with yourself, know what you want, and go for it. Can you give me an example of that, or when that? What makes you think of that? Because
we have a lot of people right now we have a lot of new opportunities that are coming about right now with our organization transforming the way it is. And we're opening up new positions and we're opening up different things just almost weekly, it seems like. And we're forming new positions, and people who may not have, at one point in my career, my CEO wanted me to be the collections manager. I would have never thought that I could be in collections. Okay. I was over collections like 12 years, and I ended up being a pretty successful in that position. But I think sometimes people are training compliance person. She would have never thought that. And now she's in her dream role because our CEO said, you know what, I see that in you. And it starts you to really think about it. And then you think, maybe I could do that, And so if anybody's ever told you that they see something in you, think about it.
The other thing I take away from your story that I love is I think the best opportunities often feel, all of my best opportunities, I'll put it this way, have always felt like a little bit like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Like they felt a little outside the comfort zone,
yeah.
But sometimes the best ones, they don't feel comfortable. And if you're always in the comfort zone, you're probably not reaching for the thing that could really take you to the next place.
For sure.
And so I think a lot of people see that thing outside the comfort zone and they back away and they go, hey, I'm not comfortable with that.
Yep.
I don't know. I just try to tell people, like, everybody that you look up to felt that way at some point.
Yes.
So when you feel that way, back up, lean in, because if someone else sees it in you, you ought to take a step back and see if you can see it in yourself and take that leap.
That's perfect. Yep. I agree.
I love it. And my last one's the hardest, so I apologize for that.
Okay,
but
great. Thanks.
It is very general, which is, what's one bold prediction for the future? It can be about this space in general. I've had everything from Super Bowl predictions to drones in agricultural underwriting for loans, which was an interesting one. But just anything that's, I'm just trying to open the doors for areas. But one bold prediction, in case we bring you back, you want to see
what bold prediction? Oh my goodness! I don't know if I have one, Jeff. Bold prediction.
It's okay. We had one guest who couldn't think of one either, and he worked for Upstart, so I felt a little
bad.
Do what? I said I had one other guest that couldn't come up with a bold prediction, and he worked here at my company, and he's like, you didn't warn me about that. I'm like, I did. You just didn't read the email. I'm sorry.
Oh man, I might have to get back to you. I'll just email it to you. You could like put my voice in the podcast later. I don't know. I mean, a bold prediction for like us is that we're gonna be like the credit union in Amarillo, because we're coming up with these new technologies that nobody here does, and that everybody's going to accept it, and it's going to be this huge revolution, and we're going to be where we already feel like we are, number one. So
I love that. That's a great bold prediction. I hope you're telling that to the team all the time. It's the kind of thing people love to hear. And I agree with the, I think there are financial institutions that are waiting to see what wins, and there are those who are out there trying to define it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for those who are willing to define what the future looks like to really take a leadership position in a way that being a follower is, I don't think, going to play as well as being a leader right now. So I love that, the ambition of that. And that's, I think, a great place to end it. So Cheryl, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts and perspectives. This was a great conversation.
I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.